our history with regards to the work that we've done and who we've supported along the way. It might be helpful in understanding the context of where our experience comes from. So we felt that would be useful. Yeah, okay. So shall I start?
You start.
This is very well rehearsed. We know exactly what we're doing. So I started off working in social care by accident, actually. I was meant to be going into music therapy. I was a cellist when I was younger, and for my own experience within that, I found out at a young age that I'd been diagnosed with a health condition, which meant that I could no longer go down that route and follow that career. And so that was quite interesting for my own personal experience, because it meant that I had that direct experience of trying to access services and trying to access support and understanding what it felt like to be a person who was being processed. Yeah, so that personal experience really helped to inform my practice and how I've approached the work that I do. And what ended up happening at that stage is a friend of mine said, I think you'd really love the work I do. Why don't you pop in and have a cup of tea and just see if you take to it? So I went into what was a residential care home, and I met 5 people within the residential care home. And these 5 people had been in Meanwood Park Hospital for at least 40 years. They'd been sectioned or institutionalised between the age of 5 years old and 8 years old, and they'd come out of hospital between the age of 45 years old and 55 years old. So they'd spent the majority of their life in an institution. And interestingly, Bob, I didn't know this at the time, but Bob was fundamental in getting them people out of that hospital. So he was involved in that piece of work. So for the first 4 years, I was working with people that were returning to community after being in a huge institution in Leeds. So that whole piece of deinstitutionalisation and understanding the impact that institutions have on people's lives, I learned really early on in my career. And I stumbled on person-centred planning. And the reason I stumbled on it is because the manager of the care home could not be bothered going on this training programme. Like literally, she kind of turned around and was like, I don't want to go, I've got better things to do with my time. It all sounds a bit fluffy. I'm not sure it's going to be that important. Would you mind going and doing this training course? And so I went on this 5-day training course. Person-centred planning was really brought over to the UK around 2001, like the 2000s era. So it's been in the UK for a long time, and it started to be embedded in strategy around that time as well, government strategy. And it just completely changed my outlook. It made that 5-day training course made me realise that the people that we were privileged enough to support actually had the opportunities and the potential to have a really good life. And what we were doing was containing them. You know, in fact, we might have moved out of the big hospital, but they were still in an institution, because the institution isn't about the bricks and mortar. It's about the way we relate to each other. It's about the attitudes that we have and how we respect each other. So from doing the person-centred planning, I'll do a quick shot to where I've got to now. I then led person-centred planning throughout a whole district, working with senior directors, working with directorate, working with service providers, working with families. I'm doing the order thing with my hands. It's interesting. It's so embedded in us. Families and working with individuals, you know, and actually getting alongside communities and doing things in a really different way, which is how I met Tim. You were doing the same stuff up in the northeast, so we used to bump shoulders and knock heads and share ideas and stuff, didn't we? And I then left that project. There was one point with the person-centred planning, which Tim's going to talk about this around money, that failed. And that was because we did a lot of planning, we did a lot of creative thinking. How do you want your life to be? What do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? Who do you want to be around? And we really learned about people, but then it stopped. We did the learning, but we didn't do the doing. So we had lots of very aspirational plans that lifted people's hope and then flattened it because nothing actually changed. And what I then wanted to test was, can I change things if I'm independent? And I left that job and I set up Imagineer as an independent person, social enterprise. We were talking about this yesterday. and just tested whether that actually made a difference. And what it meant was I could have a conversation about resources completely differently. It wasn't about what the social care money can be used for. It was about all the resources that we all have available to us. How do we make the best use of that to make stuff happen? And about 2 years ago, Bob got in touch. Bob, who has been retiring for an eternity, got in touch and through Amanda and said, I'm building a board of directors for the future of the organisation. So 2 years ago, I became a director of Life's with Friends and started working with Julie and Tim and the rest of the crew. And that's been a really, really fantastic journey. It's been great for me because it's really helped me to explore other ways of thinking and seeing things. And the other piece that I've been doing in the last 2 years is a programme called Be Humankind, which is being established in the UK. And what that has really opened up is some thinking around it's not what we do. We are so focused on what we do. We have strategies and plans and milestones and goals. We're getting it wrong completely. It's not about what we do. It's about how we are together in the pursuance of our vision. All we really need is a vision. That's like we just need something to work towards, but it's how we are with each other in the pursuance of that really makes a difference. So it's kind of bringing that cultural change in. We've got to change the culture of how we work and how we are together if we expect to have any difference in those that we support, and how we do that piece. So that's me. Sorry, did I take a long time?
You took a long time, Liz, but that's good. So similar, really. So my name's Tim, and my background is I have always pretty much done this stuff, and I think back to how I started, how I got really interested in working with people with learning disabilities. And my mum, who died a couple of years ago, was a professional Catholic, so she went to church once, twice a day. Wow. She was knew all the priests and all that kind of stuff. And she had 8 children, right? So I'm the youngest of 8. Wow. And somehow managed to do loads of stuff. So managed to help loads of people, managed to do loads of things, managed to volunteer for lots of things. For a period of time, she was a lay visitor to Northgate Hospital in Morpeth, which was our kind of local institution. And because she had 8 kids, we used to get taken everywhere. So I spent a lot of my years when I was little in Northgate Hospital thinking, who are these people? Who are these funny people? What am I doing here? And then I think that kind of really stuck. And then I worked in bars and construction. But I think I've always had this little bit of people with I don't even know why it happened. And then, so I worked in bars, and that was probably really good training for me work. And then I got asked to do my first job in social care was a residential home that was not open yet. Mm-hmm. And they needed somebody to stay there for the insurance. So I don't know how I got that job, but I did. So I used to get paid like £30 a night to stay in this house in Walker Gate in Newcastle. And the lush manager actually called Jed, he said, you don't even have to be there. You just need to be there overnight so you can go for a couple of drinks if you want. And then sleep and then get up and go again, So it's a brilliant job, best job I had actually. That's why she got really pissed in this pub called, I can't remember what the pub was called, the Wagon Way. Just down the road and then going to this place. And then from there, I got a job in a village community, so an organisation called Care. And I kind of started there in the woodwork shop at 16, 17 perhaps, with amazing people in charge of very dangerous machinery, which was really good. And then I got a job as a residential care worker there. And then I went back to the pubs. Long, boring story. And then I decided to be a social worker. Thought that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a social worker. So I did my social work training, which I loved actually. But then I had a brief taste of social work and thought, nah, that's not for me. And then I was really lucky to get a job as a supporter to a People First group. So that was in Gateshead. That was just the best job ever.
So People First is like self-advocacy, isn't it?
Yeah, like a self-advocacy group, yeah. So that was really good. And then from there, I suppose, I've always been really lucky to do jobs where I can pretty much do what I want, like what feels like a good idea. And then I suppose my light bulb moment was, I suppose I had a few light bulb moments before I did the person-centred planning training, but I didn't really have anything to hang that stuff on. So I knew that things weren't right, and I knew that things could be different. And I knew that I suppose I didn't tackle things very well. So I worked in this village community where there was a cook in the kitchen called Nora, who was really scary, right? So a similar setup to this. So there'd be people lived in these bungalows, and then there was a kitchen. And at 4 o'clock, people used to work in the kitchen as well, unpaid. At 4 o'clock, this trolley of food would be pushed down from the kitchen into the cottage where I worked, 14 people in this cottage. And one day it was 14 sausages, like very low meat content sausages, a big tin of beans, Heinz baked beans. It wasn't Heinz baked, it was like Chad Valley baked beans, and 14 packets of hula hoops, right? And that was people's tea. And I'm like, oh, where? So I rudely pushed the trolley back up to the kitchen and pushed the door with the trolley a little bit too hard. So the door kind of burst open and this trolley kind of came flying in. I don't know why I'm telling you that story either. But I suppose I always knew that stuff wasn't right or stuff could be better, but I had nothing to hang that on. I had no theory. Theory's not even the word. And then when I did the person-centred planning training, dead similar, 6 days with Suzanne McStravick from an organisation called Paradigm. And I still vividly remember all of those days. And I bumped into Suzanne McStravick 6 weeks ago or something in Scotland. So that was a real light bulb moment for me, that understanding, well, having that framework to hang good stuff on, but having some tools is not the right word, but some ways of doing brilliant stuff. So I was really inspired by that, and I continue to be really inspired by that stuff. I don't think there is anything better that has been created, described. I haven't found it. It's like it kind of holds everything, doesn't it? That so that stuff around people, families, community's really strong in it, isn't it? That got lost loads, but I think it's just the kind of, not particularly the tools and techniques, but the kind of values of it is what really floated me boat and continues to float me boat now. That's kind of still what keeps us going. So then I did loads of that similar stuff to Liz, coordinating person-centred planning in a big city, terrifying thought, like God. And then I remember banging my head on the wall on my desk one day, a person at Newcastle Skills for People I worked at, and I was responsible for making person-centred planning happen in Newcastle, and it was having very little impact. So I Googled on a bad day, what's the point of person-centred planning? Right, that's what I wanted to find the answer to. So I thought, I'll Google it. And the first Google-sponsored link that came up was an organisation called Castlebeck Care. And if anybody hasn't heard of Castlebeck Care, you might have heard of Winterbourne View, which was a big kind of scandal, abuse scandal in this country. And Castlebeck Care are the organisation who ran Winterbourne View. So I think if that's the first sponsored Google link that comes up when you have the phrase person-centred, it kind of, that blew me mind thinking, well, when that got on, we've lost the plot with this stuff. So then I started, rather than focus on the kind of training or the tools and techniques, I just thought, I'm just going to do some stuff. That's what I'm going to do. And luckily found myself in jobs where I was allowed to do some stuff. So I might talk about some of it if I remember. But I did some lush work with looked after children. So children who's been taken away from their families, doing person-centred planning with those people, using tiny bits of money to get them back home, like really successfully. Loads of young children returning to their families with a tiny bit of support and tiny bit of money. Yeah, that's probably enough, isn't it? And then during lockdown, I was very lonely, like a lot of people are. I was like really struggling. And I was sick of Zoom. And my job in my organisation was in charge of PPE fucking hell, like, excuse my French. That's like the least thing that I should be skilled at. So I was finding EU conformity certificates for dodgy masks I had found on the web. Spent months doing that. But then I took responsibility of keeping people with support connected. So I work for a provider organisation. So I took that responsibility of, I'm just going to make sure that people are okay and they're connected to each other. So loads of mobile phones and deliver them out and show people how to use them through the window and set up loads of Zoom things. I was like sick and to death of Zoom. And then Liz said, you should come to this Lives Through Friends thing on a Wednesday afternoon or something like that, once a fortnight. And I thought, I can't do it on Zoom. But then I came. And it was lush because it was Julie and Liz and Bob, and I've known Bob for a long time, but I didn't know Liz, I didn't know anybody else. And then almost by accident, I found myself the director of Lives Through Friends. Yeah, and I'm like, well, how did that happen? And so that's me Lives Through Friends journey. And I suppose, anyway, institution-wise, so my first kind of real work was getting people out of a hospital called Prudhoe Hospital when that was closed in 2009, 2013. So that was working with people who were stuck there, been stuck there for 30, 40 years, helping them build a bit of a life outside.
So that's us and our background. That's like a small introduction to 20 plus years of work. You know, so there's been a lot within that. And what we're hoping to do with the rest of the session is just share some of the top end learning that we've identified in that time. Like what do we take from what we've learned that we can share with you, hopefully, you know, in the work that you're pursuing and what you're hoping to achieve within your own countries as well. So we want to kind of just do a little bit of a, this is what we've learned, and we want to mingle that in with some stories. So not only are we kind of saying this is what we learned, but this is what actually happened. This is the story of the people that we've been alongside, and hopefully by the end of the session, just give you some takeaways for you to take with you as things to mull over and think about. Hopefully, might just have a little bit of time as well for opening that up into a conversation. So the starting point really is the nooks of it, getting right down to what makes a difference. It's really what you believe. It doesn't really matter what position statement you have. It doesn't matter what training you really give your people and your team. It's what you believe. You know, what you believe is what you achieve. You know, and actually really investing in that piece for yourself and the people that you have around you, in getting to a point of getting that into that space that we would see as being person-centered, you know. So what do we actually mean by person-centered? And we appreciate, don't we, that what we believe, what we carry with us in our beliefs really affects our actions. It influences how we act. It influences how we behave. It influences the decisions that we make. So if we believe that people are safer with people who also have a disability, then we're not going to get to a good place. If we believe that people are a burden on society, we're not going to get to a good place. But if we believe that everyone has something to contribute, that Joey, who has been in that hospital for 20 years, can actually do the local milk round, that Beth, that's been in that hospital for 15 years, is capable of taking care of children and nurturing children. If we see and we believe that people have things to contribute, we're going to get to a much better place. And if we move away from seeing the labels and the deficiencies, and we see the qualities that everyone has to offer and the uniqueness of that quality, and we don't expect everyone to fit into the same mould, but we really appreciate the difference that everyone brings, then we're going to get to a good place. So really spending time on the values is really important, and remembering that person-centeredness is not something we do. You don't do person-centered. You are person-centered. Yeah. So I remember when I first did the person-centered planning training, I was talking to my boss afterwards on the telephone. Glad you love the training, Liz. That's really brilliant. Would you do us a favour? Would you just pull out people's personal plans and just delete personal plan and put person-centered plan?
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
So then we've ticked the box. Then everyone has a person-centered plan. That's the doing. That's when we fall into doing. And what we need to be doing is being person-centered. And to achieve that, it's not how we support the people that are within our services that we're gifted and privileged to be able to support. It's how we are with everyone. It's how we are with each other as a team. It's how we are with families. It's how we are with the community. We really embed it completely. And if we don't align with them person-centered values, whatever we do, we could be working 10 to the dozen. We could be doing 100 hours a week. We could be sweating over what we do, but we're not going to get there because we're not aligning to it. And one of the things, and it feels, hi man, it feels like old hat, doesn't it really? You've all heard of the values of inclusion. Have you heard of the values of inclusion that came from the work of Jack Pierpoint and Marsha Forrest and the Inclusion Institute in Canada? Is this familiar? Well, what we'd like to do is just run through some of the values of inclusion, because actually when we talk about beliefs and values, for us, the values of inclusion have been an absolute bedrock. Yeah, this is our check-in point. This is how we reflect and think about how we do and what we do and how we are with each other. So one of the first ones that really stands out is all means all. So it's recognizing that when we're born, every single citizen is born equal. Yeah, we're born in community. It's only at a later stage that we're excluded. And the thing that excludes us is this predetermination that if somebody requires extra support, they then need to be serviced. And it's that point that people become excluded. So we need to change that dynamic about how we think at that early stage. So from the beginning, culturally, people are included. Yeah, from the beginning. Because what we learn is institutionalization damages people. You know, it really damages. And actually, deinstitutionalization and getting back into community is hard. It's long work. It's long work and it's hard. But if we can prevent institutionalization in the first place, it's a much better thing. So one of the values is all means all. The other value is everyone can communicate, and it's recognizing that whoever we're alongside, every single person we know can communicate. There's no question about it. Everyone can, and you've kind of.
So I'm just thinking about that all means all stuff, and the values of inclusion. I sometimes feel like a bit kind of up there and a bit difficult to explain, I think. But when you think about all means all, you kind of look around here, don't you? And that, like, you know it when you see it. So when you come here, you kind of feel that, rather than explain it or describe it. But everyone can communicate. This is a story, and it's probably as much about me thinking I'm brilliant, which is one of my massive failings, but also a bit funny, right? So I when I did my social work training, I worked with 3 people who had been in a big hospital, Prudhoe Hospital, who had moved out into a house in Sunderland where they shared with each other vaguely successfully. And I was only there for 3 months, and I thought, well, what can I do in 3 months that will have some kind of impact? Really weird placement, because I'd come from that, I'd done that as a job, so what am I going to learn? So some of us thought I'm going to stir things up a little bit. So there's one bloke who the only interactions he ever had with staff was when they interacted with him, when they chose to interact with him. So I got him a doorbell, which the staff hated, so he could press his doorbell, and then they would have to come when he pressed his doorbell. That was brilliant. And then the other bloke was a bloke called Jeffrey, and Jeffrey was fascinating. He could use words, but he chose not to, and he hadn't spoken for about 20 years. He had lost his teeth because he lived on a ward in Prudhoe where one of the skills of the staff, or one of the abuses of the staff, was they would have a competition to see who could do dinner the quickest, who could feed people the quickest. So people were fed really quickly. Jeff chose to regurgitate his food in order to taste it. So he'd wolf it down, he'd regurgitate it, taste it, and the stomach acid. Horrible, horrible stuff. So I worked really closely with Jeffrey, thinking I'm going to build a lush relationship, and like really arrogantly, I'm going to build a lush relationship with him. My 3 months are going to be transformational. Like, I'm so brilliant that I'm going to transform his life in 3 months. So I worked with him really closely. Bearing in mind, he hadn't spoken for 20 years. And looking back on it now, I was just getting on his nerves. That's what I was doing. So he used to grab hold of you and get a glass of water. So I got him a carafe that he could fill up himself. Anyway, so I worked with him really closely, quite intensely for 3 months. And about 2.5 months in, he turned to us and said, "Go away," which was the first words he had spoken in 20 years. And that was, I mean, I thought it was brilliant as well. And I kind of did. I thought, right, that's it. I'm finished with you now. But
I mean, it goes beyond communicating. He were taking control.
Taking control. Like, you get out of my face, please. Go, like, really clearly as well. Go away. Aye. So that's my little everyone communicates story. Not particularly, but it was not like a transformational speech. Yes, Julie's public speaker now. He speaks all over the world. No, he doesn't. Hopefully, he tells a few more people to go away. That'll be really good. That'll be a brilliant skill if he.
Such high tolerance. There's 3 months with it before he actually.
Before he said it, yeah. Well, he was just.
And I've got a similar. It's similar in a way, as in the end piece is similar. There was a young guy that I worked with, and he'd been known as not being able to communicate. He can't communicate. So any planning work that had ever been done around him had always been done for him, because people were working from the presumption that he can't speak. And his 2 forms of communication were this and that was, yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So the very first, exactly, gestures, yeah. And that's exactly what the point was there with regards to bring these family, the people that knew and loved him really well together, so that as somebody facilitating the person-centered plan, we just had a really open conversation. It's like, okay, Anthony, so when you're really excited about something, how do I know that? How do you show that? And this family then shared, well, Anthony, you do this. If you don't like something or you're bored or whatever, so that I really got into the space of understanding that really subtleness of his communication. So when it came to having the get-together for his plan and thinking about the future and what he wanted to do, his family were then sharing ideas based on what they knew of him, but what went on the plan, Anthony determined. Because whenever an idea came up as a facilitator, I go, where does that sit with you? Is that a yes? Is that a no? Is that I'm bored? And so the plan at the end of it was absolutely his. There was no way it was anybody else's. And when the social worker then got involved, it went straight into that transactional place. So rather than it being relational, she came along to do her job. And so she came into the meeting, and in the meeting, she wasn't convinced that plan was his. She didn't understand how he'd built the relationships to make sure the plan was his at the end. And she said, and I'm here, I really want to get to know you, Anthony. It's really important that we get to know each other and we have a really good relationship, and I want to build that. And in the meeting, he started going, right? So she says, oh, you like me. So you're starting to like me. You're starting to talk to me. But everybody that knew Anthony knew that actually meant, you can say it for me, I don't swear very often, unless I've had a drink. But she was basically telling him to go away. He was telling her to go away, get out of my face. Yeah. But she wasn't taking the time to get to know him at all. And that was on the presumption. She was working from the presumption he couldn't communicate. So, yeah. So that's kind of one of the bedrocks, isn't it? And another one is around everyone is ready. And a few years ago, there was an innovation conference happening in York. And I think this is where we want to shed some light on. We appreciate that over here, we may be deemed as being the country that have got all this right, that we're light years ahead, but we're really not. There's been a lot of errors, there's been a lot of mistakes made. And in York, the idea around everyone is ready is that everyone's ready to be part of community. We don't expect people to fit a criteria. People don't need to pass a test. People are ready to be there in that space and to contribute and belong. But we then, even as the service, we still put up barriers to achieving it. And this innovative program in York had set up a 3-stage process. So people moving out of hospital went into the first bungalow. And in the first bungalow, you learned how to cook. And once you could cook for yourself, you moved into the second bungalow. And in that bungalow, you learned to take care of the property. And once you could do that, you moved into the third bungalow. And then you learned how to reply to letters and take care of your money. And then you were seen as being ready to move into the community. And that's the type of thing we really need to avoid in any deinstitutionalisation work. Don't set the barriers. Don't make people have to pass a test to be ready to live the life. Because in all honesty, like if I ask the question, if I think about that, I would not have got past bungalow 1. I'm rubbish at cooking. I would have been stuck in bungalow one for years and years, you know, and so we don't want to put people in that position.
Tim and I were on a call, weren't we, earlier this week? Earlier this week.
Yeah.
Where essentially the commissioner, local authority commissioner, was saying real problems. The team is saying this person should never leave hospital. Where out of that we had to take was the usual one. Why did you engage us then?
Yeah.
I thought we'd started from the position that nobody should be there. You commissioned a system which is basically employing a whole gang of people who are getting paid to keep people
in hospital.
Essentially, you've got to change that. You've got to tell them their job is to get people out.
Yeah.
Not to put obstructions in the way. We actually based that to say, this isn't our job. It's not our job. We're nearly at the point where we can say this is what we need to put in place to help this person move. But you've got to tell these people to get the hell out of it. And to his credit, he did.
Yeah.
And the regional funder and said, we'll get those people and we'll tell them. If we hadn't said that.
No, that's exactly, we just drift another 20 years.
It's like a hamster wheel, isn't it? You know, if we keep doing the same stuff that we've always done, if we keep going around that same circle and we don't manage to find a way to step off of that, we will never get anything different. So and it's that takes courage, takes vision, courage to be the person that stops the hamster wheel and kind of go, hang on a second, you know, we need to do this differently. One of the other ones is around Everyone Belongs, and you shared a lush story on the way down around the bowling.
Yeah, this is what I think I might have spoke to you about it last night, Hugh. So my day job is an organisation supporting people, and sometimes the system celebrates. Bob, you were talking this morning about your daughter being employee of the month or something like that. Yeah.
Tell the story about it.
Yeah. So sometimes we kind of celebrate the wrong stuff, or people get rewarded for weird stuff, and then people don't feel that excellent, not stuff, but people kind of sometimes miss the brilliant work, right? So I was talking to a support worker the other day, who I speak to often, never very deeply about anything, but I was talking to him. I had been to a charity event at a local bowling club, you know, outdoor bowls, and I was joking with him because my friend Clint is a solicitor and he plays golf in Germany. And what are you doing this week? I'm playing golf and I've got a box at the cricket, and then I'm going to a big champagne reception at such and such. I'm thinking, how does he get that, and how do I end up on a Saturday afternoon at the local Crown Green Bowling Club, right? So I was having this conversation with my friend, and he was saying, which bowling club is that? I said, it's the one in Monk's Eaton. I said, I'm a member of the one over the road. I said, I didn't know that. Didn't know you played bowls. And he was saying, there's so I've been there. My dad was president there. I'm president now. And do you know Paul, who was supposed to? I said, well, Paul's been going there for donkey's years. And I kind of took him along once or twice. And now he kind of goes by himself. He's in a different team to me. I barely see him. He's got loads of friends. He's made loads of connections. He's turned out to be brilliant at bowls. And last week he was at an event where he was playing with my son, as John was saying, and they won this competition and they beat people who were like ex-British champions and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, why the fuck did you not think that was a good story to kind of did you not feel there was something to celebrate? And that's something brilliant. Using his own networks to connect somebody who he supports into his own social network. Just that amazing, brilliant stuff that this Paul's got loads out of, and he's part of a different community, and he's not seen as the odd bloke. Yeah. Paul, this is a terrible thing to say, but it's true. He's a pain in the backside. So he's not he wouldn't be the easiest bloke to connect. If I was connecting somebody to my friends, I think I might not connect him because he'd just get on their nerves. But John's done this amazing bit of work, and what was the point of that again, Liz?
Belonging.
Yeah, that's. Everybody belongs, and does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, it's a brilliant story. I want him to tell it to everybody in the world. I want him to inspire his teammates to do that kind of stuff. Yeah. But he didn't think it was all that important. He just thought which in its own way, that's brilliant, isn't it? This is the work I do quietly in the background. Yeah. But what you want is more people to more people to do that work quietly in the background.
Yeah.
And the only way they can do that is by.
It's a shift in it, isn't it? I think it's important to put that into context of there's so many initiatives that are set up around, let's set up an arts and crafts group for people with learning disabilities and people can come together. So that feels a little bit different than the usual service because, you know, it's something that's creative and it's something different. But is that belonging? Is that really belonging? Whereas this story that you shared is around linking into the fact that someone's interested in something, bowling, thinking around your networks, who you have in the community. That guy didn't go to a bowling group that was set up for people with disabilities. He went to a bowling group because the people loved playing bowls of all different ilks and backgrounds, and he belonged. You know, it's a completely different thing. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes a difference. And that's enduring. The one thing that's really different is that relationship will continue, irrelevant of whether a support worker takes him.
Yeah.
You know, whereas if the arts and crafts session stops, it stops.
Yeah.
So it's thinking about things that will be enduring in people's lives and crafting that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that right?
That's perfect.
Is that right? So another one is around everyone can contribute, and it kind of links in a little bit with the story there. You know, somebody joined that bowling group. Paul got down there, joined in. He's helped to win quite a significant match. He was part of the team. That's a contribution. A lady that I worked alongside who was still living in the family home, facing huge systemic barriers in getting out of the family home. She, you know, no housing, no support. No matter where she went, she could not get the things in place that she needed to be able to move on with her life. And we did some work together. She got her own bungalow. She got her own team of support set up. Everything is going really well for her. And she's been in her own place for 5 years now. In the second year of being in that place, she decided that she wanted to do something for other people who are in the same situation that she's been in. So she set up her own social enterprise called Disability Roadmap. And people can contact her and say, I'm in this situation, what do I do? And she helps them out. And so that's a massive contribution that she's making as a result of being able to lead the life that she wants to lead. Yeah. So when we do this stuff, it's like a drop in the water. It has this huge ripple effect in the difference it makes, not in just the person's life, but the community around them as well.
I've just thought of another really good example there. I can't remember where it sits with this, but that kind of contribution. Or I was just thinking as you were speaking there, that I really believe that the best things happen unplanned often, right? So I think if I had planned to get that bloke attached to the bowling club, it probably wouldn't have worked. Do you know what I mean? I suppose so. What I've been trying to do for a while is just how can we create the conditions where unplanned things can happen? Does that make sense? Yeah. So this is one of the best stories, and again, I probably wouldn't have been able to make it happen, plan it, right? But I decided that I was going to set up. So I nicked the name from Starfire Council in Cincinnati. If people heard of them, they're brilliant. A bit of inspiration. So they're called learning labs, right? So it's in the town where I work, I put on 6 sessions. So one was my friend Scott, who makes guitars out of cigar boxes. So he put a workshop on. Somebody does soap out of crap stuff. Yeah. Somebody does glass painting. What's it called? Iris paper folding. Has anybody heard of Irish paper folding? I had never heard of Irish paper folding. That's okay. A bit like that. And another collection of. I did a session on person-centered planning. Right. Nobody came. Right. That was my contribution. But we had 6 things over 6 weeks. Every Saturday for 6 weeks. In those 6 things, there was 2 people with a learning disability were workshop hosts. Right. It wasn't advertised as a learning disability thing. It wasn't saying please come along support this poor special person who likes this random thing. It was just here's 6 sessions. People came. I didn't come to that Irish paper folding one because I couldn't, right? It was a woman called Susan. And it was based in a little shop, a community shop. So the 5 things happened. It was lush, and the Irish paper folding thing happened, and people came to that, and it was brilliant, right? Support workers came and supported people to do it. And then the next day, after the Irish paper folding session, which is folding paper really intricately and putting it in cards and all that, I went into the shop, opened up the shop, and there was a little note under the door And the little note said, I can remember it vividly, "Hiya, I'm really sorry I couldn't make the Irish paper folding workshop. My name's Mary," or something like that. "Could you please put us in touch with Susan? Because I've never met anybody else who does Irish paper folding. It would be great to get connected," right? And you think, God, like you couldn't plan for that, could you? You couldn't make that happen, but they're creating an environment where that might be possible. It's fantastic. I thought that if you're looking at thinking, if people are asking you for outcomes, or people are like, that's it, but the only way that happened is because we made something, we created the possibility of that stuff happening. And then they met and hate each other. That's a joke. No.
Feeding on from there's opportunity and possibility.
Right, okay. Right, okay. Yeah.
And also some of the stuff that Plan, Rebecca and Shelley were sharing around that connection, the belonging.
Yeah.
Shall I
carry on, Liz?
Move on to the outside.
Yes, that would be brilliant.
Sharing that. I've not done a time check, so I don't know how we're doing time.
Quarter past 10.
Oh, good.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, that's brilliant. So the Outsiders, we'll share the story of the Outsiders and kind of bounce that around a little bit with regards to what we've been covering so far. So it was 15 years ago, there was some funding available to help to demonstrate how learning can happen well in an environment that's not restricted. So without a curriculum, without any prior requirements, how people can learn and grow and develop in that kind of environment. So kind of similar to what Tim was just explaining there, you create the conditions. So we were successful, got this funding and put a call out for people who was interested in music. And we had quite a few people get in touch. And as a result, we had a group of people that came together. And over 3 months, we got together, met for the first time. We rehearsed once a week. And at the end of the 3 months, we had a group of folk who had formed a band and were ready to go and perform. So it was kind of a really short space of time. And these are people that had otherwise been seen as not able to learn, not able to adapt, had been given labels of whatever sort. But we together had managed to go on this journey of getting to a stage of getting up on a stage and going and performing. And we chose 2 of the main venues in Leeds, the Carriage Works and Seven Arts Centre. And we got there and they performed and it was brilliant. The crowd were fantastic, really good response, really good turnout. And at the end of that, we had a get together and we were doing some planning together as a group. And the conversation was around, where do you want to go next? Because the project has finished, the funding's been used. Where do you want to go next with your learning? And what came back from that conversation was, we don't want to go anywhere. we want to continue doing this. And so it carried on and it continued. And there was a kind of a period of time of discovering, like, how do we do this? How do we work together? How do we move this forward? And we explored different avenues of funding to make that happen. But what we reached was a recognition that everyone accessed a personal budget. And actually there was no reason why a personal budget could not be utilised to help to keep the band going. So that opened up a whole range of conversations with social workers and commissioners about how to make that happen. I ended up in a situation where I was demonstrating the value, the financial value. I had to go into massive detail about cash flow forecasting, how much it costs to run the session, and therefore how much it costs per session, so that they could clarify the budget and they could sign off the budget as well and feel confident with what they were spending. Now, interestingly, at that time, the amount it cost to run the Outsiders was exactly the same as the amount it cost for a person to go to a big day centre in Leeds, where generally people just sat around all day and then went home at the end of the day, and generally spent most of the time on the not the public transport, on the council transport, getting there and getting home, So we've got this system where people are on the bus for 2 hours. they get to this centre where nothing's happening. And then they're on a bus for 2 hours to get home as well. So we were managing to do something really creative and meaningful for the same price as a day centre provision.
What's interesting is around that is we put it in the policy context. When we won the case early in the 2000s, the notion of individual budgets was accepted.
Yeah.
Government intended those budgets to be available in just the same way as any other welfare benefit was made. We were talking yesterday about where the law begins and ends. Because the reason that Liz spent hours and days preparing lots and lots of justifications for how that money should be spent should never have happened. Because of the people should have made their own decisions about that. But what had happened was that the institutions, in this case the social services department's directors, had decided that they had to put lots and lots of regulations in the way that were never law. They're just obstructions. But people then who work within those systems believe they're legal, they believe they're law, and their lawyers start to believe they're law, and they're not. And part of what we do at Lawyers Through Friends very often is have to sit in a room with people that think that they're telling us that there are rules that actually matter. We're having to say to them, actually, you've made those up. They're not real.
I mean, I think that's one of the strongest learning points as well with the work that we do is we recognise as barriers what we're trying to do. We're going to have to overcome things. And you either prepare, like I did in this instance, because I knew what they needed and I knew what I needed to convince them of to get past that, or you go around it. You go around it and either seek forgiveness afterwards or hope it never gets raised, you know. But what ended up happening for the outsiders was there were a number of things really. I were getting inundated with phone calls. We had so many people that wanted to join this band. It was unbelievable. I had a waiting list of 40 people wanting to join the band. And it's always been run on the principle of it's the band. They're in charge. They decide where they rehearse, they decide what they rehearse, they decide who's in the band, they decide what gigs they do. Just like Tim was saying, all we did was create the space to help them facilitate what they wanted and make that possible. We didn't have any control. The band had full control over all of that. So I'm there with these 40 people thinking, well, what do I do? And so from the outsiders, that was a springboard into Beat It sessions, where we were running music sessions that people came along to with the same principle, with the people attending having control and their say and getting from the sessions what they wanted to get from the sessions. That then led on to people saying, I want a social life. There's nowhere to go. The only place that I can go for a night out is just for people with disabilities. And I just want to go into town and have a good night out like everyone else does. So then we set up Beat It nights, where it was nights that were happening in the city centres and people could go along. And it was done in this sense of we were around, so people felt safe to go and didn't feel like they were out on their own in the middle of town. But it was done in a way that it was an open night. So we'd be in a bar where the rest of the community would be, where the rest of the town would be going for a night out. But we would just be there in and amongst it as well. And we'd put on, if people wanted to perform, there'd be a stage and there'd be certain artists that would want to come and do dance shows or comedy acts or music, or there'd be jam sessions, or people wanted to DJ. So we created a platform for people who had not had the opportunity to get out and perform before in a place that was actually open to the whole community. So it was a kind of a platform for people to become known as artists as well in their own right in that town. So this, not only did this idea work really well for the band's members, but it actually opened up a whole range of things that happened for the whole community. And at one point we was working with about 150 people every week, and it was all done on the same principle of people accessing a personal budget and being in control of their own experience as well. But the outsiders really grew massively, and after the first performance, one of the band members' mum came over to me and she said, how did you make that happen? And I thought she meant like practically. So it's like, well, we booked a venue, we advertised it, we let people know what time it started. And she went, no, she said, you're misunderstanding me. She said, my son's had a speech impediment his whole life. He's had speech and language therapists work with him. He's really struggled in school. He's really struggled in education. She said, you've been with him for 3 months. He's just got up on stage and he's sang all the songs, he's introduced all the band and even said jokes in between each song. How did you manage to do that? And I don't know the science behind it at all. I don't really understand how we did that at all. The only thing I can put it down to is that we never focused on what he'd been seen as being his problem. Because when people joined the band, we only asked 2 questions. One of them was, is there anything that really upsets you that we need to avoid? And do you have a health problem that we need to know about? And we didn't want to know anything else. We didn't do assessments. We didn't want to know about people's past. We didn't want to know about people's medical history. We didn't want to know anything of that kind. We just wanted to get to know people and share a space where we could enjoy the love of music together. And that's the only thing I can put it down to, because I don't know what it's like for you, but if you've got something that you think you're bad at, or somebody's pointed out that maybe you've got a bit of a failing in a certain area, as soon as there's a lens put on it, it magnifies, doesn't it? And I know I've personally experienced that. And I genuinely believe that for a lot of the people that access services, the magnifying glass is on the deficiency, and all that does is increase the deficiency. And if we just take the lens off that completely, we create a different condition where, you know, people can become a different version of themselves in a positive way. One of the other learnings that came from it as well was the friendships. It was really about the friendships and the relationships that developed. So outside of what we were doing together, people were self-organising without our knowledge. You know, we didn't, nothing to do with us. Nothing, you know, we have no control. This is people's lives. They were getting in touch with each other thanks to technology, and organising to go for meals together, to go on holiday together, to go fairs together, helping each other out. It's like, well, I'd come, but I don't know how to get there. I'm not really confident on getting on a bus. And they'd help each other out. It's like, oh, well, I'll meet you here, and then we'll do that bit together. Nothing to do with us at all. And that all come from the fact that people were getting together and really forming meaningful friendships as well. And at one point, I'm not monetary driven at all. You know, it's not something that floats my boat. But there was one point, just out of interest, I took some time out and I did a little bit of a measure around, we've got these personal budgets coming in, and what are we getting in return? And I worked out rudimentary, I mean, not like to an accountant's level, but for every £1 coming in to the activity from a personal budget, we were matching that with £3. And that was coming from funding. That was coming from donations. That was coming from sales, because we have got the best entrepreneurs in the Outsiders, really smart at how to generate money through merchandise, through gigs, really kind of exploring different ways of bringing money in. But then also social capital, because they were getting to know bands. We rehearsed in a rehearsal space that all the local bands rehearsed in, so a little like bit of musical heritage for the area, the band called The Mission and The Cuds and Kaiser Chiefs and Pigeon Detectives. It was a proper rehearsal space with professional bands rehearsing. And they had really good social capital. And there'd be times when these bands that were hitting the charts would be sat in the same room as the Outsiders, comparing notes on equipment, comparing notes on merchandise and where to get your T-shirts. Yeah, like it would absolutely... There were no difference recognised at all. There were musicians, that was it. It's really simple. And for me, that's really telling. You know, if we can create something, a lot of the time we're told we can't do this fun stuff, we can't do this creative stuff because it costs too much. You know, when you're doing this from a statutory public funds. Yeah. But if we are brave enough to really use them funds differently, it comes back threefold. You know, so it's really about pushing that boat out and really kind of opening up a different way of doing it. But sometimes you've got to jump over the hurdles. Doing the spreadsheet at the beginning and demonstrating to the social work team and answering and ticking all their boxes, that was just opening the door to be able to do. We had to open the door. Otherwise, we wouldn't have got to being able to do the good stuff. But I think the thing that's important as well, and one of the learning things for me was self-awareness. There were certain times through that journey with the Outsiders where I had to be really self-aware. I recognised that I was doing stuff that were creating the barriers. So, and that all came from me being absolutely from the health and social care world. So let me think of some examples. We went to a festival. We got some money to go on tour. Went to a festival, Green Gathering Festival, and got there. It's like all exciting, setting up as tents. It's great and it's fun. We've got to a festival. Start walking around the festival site, and I'm like, I'm doing my risk assessment. Oh my God, there's a bar. I'm sure I can smell weed. What's that? What are them mushrooms that they're selling there? It's like, and I went straight into this space of, we've got to stick together, keep an eye on each other. We'll have meeting points if we get lost. Counting heads, exactly. I went straight into that space, and I literally had to take myself out of the zone, go back to my tent and have a word with myself and go, we're at a festival. These guys are living their life. They've got to get on with it. I've got to stop getting in the way. And I were creating the barrier. And I think there's a massive thing about being really honest with yourself and self-aware when you're creating the barrier and doing something with that as well. And also recognizing that we're not just giving. Like, you know, sometimes the amount of times people have said, I'm sure you've had this as well, Tim, don't you do a good job? It's amazing what you do. You know, you've got such a, but it's not like that at all. It's completely reciprocal. Everything I put into everything I've done, I've got back. It's an equal, there's an equality in the relationship. And with the Outsiders, I'd trained as a, no, I trained as a musician, but always being absolutely scared of getting on stage. It's like ridiculous, isn't it? I really wanted to be a musician, but you could not get me on stage. I was a nervous wreck. Didn't know what I was doing.
Why were you a nervous wreck?
Because I just didn't like being in front of people. I mean, it's bizarre. I didn't like being in front of people. I really didn't. I was just so shy.
Really difficult, isn't it, to be
Yeah.
in front of people when you can't do it?
Yeah, absolutely. And so when I set up the Outsiders, I had musicians that came in to work with them, because even though I was a musician, I did not want to get on stage.
You didn't want to get on stage?
No. So, I mean, and it's ironic, isn't it? I'm coaching a band and coaching people to
You don't want to do it if you don't want to get on stage.
Yeah. So, but on one occasion, the bass player didn't turn up at the last minute. I don't know whether this were engineered, to be fair. I don't know if it were planned. And they said, Liz, you're the only person that plays bass. You're going to have to get up and play. And I was put on the spot in the moment, thrown in the deep end. And the band coached me.
So you did play the bass?
Yeah. And now I can get up and play without it being a problem.
Whereas before, when you used to do it, you couldn't. You didn't want to get up on stage.
Yeah. So the Outsiders helped me overcome that barrier for myself. So we've got to start seeing it as, yeah. So I think that kind of covers it for the Outside. The only other thing was the use of the personal budget, you know.
Right.
We get.
I was going to say, tea and coffees are there, aren't they?
Yes, and we've got some water at the back as well.
So, if you guys want a cup of coffee, just let me know. I'll make them.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone want a brew?
All right, at the moment. In a little
You're
bit.
okay.
Yeah, I think it's a bit warm for me to have a brew.
All right.
Yeah.
Half an hour, brilliant.
So we used the budget in a really different way. So like over here, we're still stuck in this situation of people get a budget and you can use it for someone to help you get a bath. Or, you know, it's like basic use. Whereas the Outsiders use their personal budget for buying equipment, covering rehearsal time, buying merchandise, paying for session musicians to come and teach them, paying for the touring equipment so they got a trailer and a van so they could go on tour. So the use of the personal budget had nothing to do with that baseline that we usually get in social care. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're still going, Liz? Really?
Yeah.
They've got a website.
Yes. Yeah. And they're on. So the pandemic hit them quite hard. And actually, it was really lovely. Last weekend was it last weekend, the weekend before? No, the weekend before, they did the first gig ever since the start of the pandemic. Yeah, because it hit them quite badly. But yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of the Outsiders, and they are still going, and they're still referenced as a really good example of how to do this stuff well.
For how long has this been going on?
That's big question. 13 years?
Oh.
13 years, maybe 14. I'm losing count, but something like that. Yeah, and there's been changes in the bands, you know, and some of them have been really like big changes where people joined the band and through being alongside people and sharing that thing and going and doing stuff that's exciting and meeting other musicians and their confidence and identity becoming stronger, people have then said, well, actually, I fancy doing this now. And going on and feeling confident enough to say exactly what they want to do, and going and getting on with it. Whether that's joining a drama group, or one band member got married and moved to Birmingham with his new wife, and you know, all this stuff kind of came from that. So it's kind of been quite a journey. Yeah. And they wrote their own music as well. So they started doing covers, and then they started learning how to write their own music, and they wrote their own songs, and they got into the studio and they recorded them, and you know, produced CDs and sold CDs, and you know, so there was a lot. There was a lot that happened, and they went from coming as singers to learning different instruments as well. So that whole like personal development was huge, really. So yeah.
Is this making sense to people? Or are we just talking?
In general, I was comparing what we are doing.
Okay.
We do it practically because now we don't have too much money now to continue this deinstitutionalization. We are working now mostly with small residential institutions with kids, trying to support them to under vocational education, you know. But in general, all this you need to believe. I think that this you need to believe is the most important thing, you know. And for example, in our case, we are not service providers, but mostly like service developers. But we try to make people that are service providers to believe, you know.
Yeah.
We had a very interesting case. I just remember when you told about all that we work with residential institutions where people also stayed like all their life, you know. Many of them, they didn't have any connections and so on. We try to identify at least maybe they had in the past some properties, to try to link to their communities, you know, and to their families and to their relatives and so on. And we developed several supported living houses for people that didn't have where to go. And in these supported living houses, based on social role valorization model, there is no room for staff. It is just a place where they live together and they benefit of all community services. Many guys that pass through this supported living, they have already their independent life. We have couple married, we have kids, as I showed during this conference. But one of these guys was there, and he saw that many other guys, they have already their families, they lived independent life, and he dreamed to have his own space and to live independently and so on. And he just had one destroyed house from his grandmother in one village, and he dreamed of this house, you know. There were no money at all, you know, to this house to renovate and so on. Finally, the people and the local public authorities work with, we have a very good, let's say, district with very good local public authorities with many services developed. And they pass through a lot of training, and they built around this guy community, you know, from people, business people and so on. Finally, I had that he moved to his house. His house was renovated. He got some job there, and he has a community surrounding, you know, supporting him. Because he is living now, I think, 2 years already in these communities in his grandmother's house. It's very interesting. When he gets sick, everybody from neighbors informed local authorities in the district that he needs some help, that he gets sick and so on. and he received support, and still he's living there.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Fantastic.
he was with severe disabilities.
Yeah.
let's say.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think it's that thing, isn't it, that there is, I think sometimes there is a habit of seeing a person's circumstances and then looking at what's available within the service structure. I know that's definitely the case in what I've experienced, where, for instance, one lady that I worked with who had been in a severe car accident in her mid-40s, and the local health board was trying to find somewhere for her to be. And the only place I could find was a residential care home that was for older people with dementia.
Oh my God.
So she ended up being placed in this
We had this
care
case, right?
care home because they were purely thinking about what do we have available. You know,
Oh my God.
where do we have a room? Where do we have?
You can see in this case it's so interesting because
Yeah.
we try to develop these supported living houses close to some road services and so on, in order that they can go to school, can go to, I don't know, some jobs. Many of them have jobs and so on.
Mhm.
But this was a village far away from the district, you know,
Okay.
with limited access
Mhm.
to services. Can you imagine a Moldovan village,
Mhm.
just electricity and
Mhm.
you know, a small one. And these guys wanted them to live in his grandma house, and
Yeah.
he's still there, and he can do that.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
receives his allowances and so on, and he has all this community support. It is amazing and very
Yeah.
interesting. Many people didn't trust on that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but it
Yeah,
but it
yeah.
worked.
You know,
Yeah, yeah.
that they saw that maybe, you know, he will be abused in the community,
Ah.
he will
Mhm.
be violated,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so on.
And that's going back to that piece of we need to be aware of when our own thinking is going to limit somebody's
Yes.
life.
Yes.
And you know, that whole thing of, well, this might happen or that might happen. We can work from the place of risk to shut anything down. You know, if we really, but the one thing that we often, when we get into that space, the one thing that we often overlook is the risk of controlling someone's life. You know,
But I
the
also see
impacts that that has.
because in my country there are not too many regulations around. You know?
Yeah, yeah.
He's grown up, you know, he is after 18 years old. We don't have regulations that he has the right to move from this service to another
Mhm.
service.
Yeah.
We don't have these regulations that he couldn't move, that there is a need for some paper for that. And that's why authorities, you know, acted accordingly. They
Yeah,
are
yeah.
not afraid to act.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm thinking now that maybe sometimes regulations maybe you need to have for the quality of services, but sometimes they can create barriers. You know?
Yeah.
How
Definitely.
you can move among that, you know, regulations that create that you, let's say,
Yeah.
look for quality, let's say standards and so on, and regulations that can create barriers.
Yeah.
How we can move among that.
Mhm.
This is, I think, an
Moving around,
important thing.
or gently dance around it.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's ways of just like we know it's there, that we know it's there, but there's sometimes ways of just kind of going, recognizing it, but finding a way around.
It's
You know,
interesting.
yeah, yeah.
But
Definitely.
believe in that, I think it is the most important thing. And support, believe and support.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Definitely. What
Shall we
time are
open up?
Got quarter of an hour.
Yeah, so I
Okay.
think one thing that we wanted to do, I don't know whether we still want to do this. One of the things we talked about is opening it up so there could be small discussions
Mhm.
for, like, is there anything that we've brought to today that's resonated or opened up a bit of thinking? And that kind of question, is there anything you do differently moving forward based on what we've talked about?
Mhm.
Should we still do
Yeah,
that?
yeah, go for
right,
it.
we'll do that. Okay, so what we thought would be interesting and a way of opening it up so that we're all part of the conversation is to think about if there's anything we've brought, and we're not being arrogant enough to suggest that we've brought something you didn't already know.
Mhm.
That's all. But is there anything that we've brought up in the conversation today that has been a moment where you've thought, do you know, that's something that I'd like, that's a bit of a light bulb moment, or that's something that's opened up a different way of seeing or thinking about things? And as a result of us having this time together today, is there anything that you would potentially do differently, or a different way of being moving forward that would potentially make a difference in what you're pursuing within your own country? So we'd like to just like spend maybe a little bit of time having that conversation and then coming back and hearing what you've gained from that. And then we just wanted to do a Jerry Springer moment with some closing thoughts, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah.
You
So
know
is that
There's something really powerful in that, what you're saying about just believing and like trusting people and just doing it.
Yeah.
I think in loads of the work I do, there's a Geordie phrase which is "howe," which just means howe. Like, let's just do it. Let's not worry so much about the regulations.
Yeah. Just
And
get on with it.
that kind of let's howe. Yeah, that sounds all right. Howe, let's just do that. And then, yeah, I think that's probably 90% of the work, isn't it? Just that agreement to howe. I'll say at work, howe, it'll be a laugh, and people go, it could be, let's do that. Rather than, let's plan it out in great detail. Let's howe, we'll do that. Howe, we'll set up this massive butterfly garden thing. Howe, we'll do that band thing. Howe, we'll sort that bloke out in his village. It's that kind of real simplicity, isn't it, which we'll miss massively. Sorry.
Yeah.
That just leapt into my head.
Good. So are we all right to maybe, if we go into groups of 3? Rob, are you joining in?
No, I'm in between.
You're in between.
Coming to
Yeah. So maybe we could logically just kind of go with the 3 people that you're closest to. So there's Amanda and Martin behind you. Sorry, I've forgotten your name. You told Sandy, yeah, Sandy from Malta. So there's Amanda and Martin behind. So Martin's a director from Lives with Friends as well. So, and Ladivia, are you? Yeah. We recognise that actually that led to some really hearty conversation. It's always really hard when you're facilitating something when there's hearty conversation to bring it like to an end. So one of our learning points from this session is make more time for hearty conversation. So yeah. Yeah, it's good. It's really good. And I mean, it's completely up to you. If there's something from them conversations that you want to share with the larger group, then great. If there's nothing that you want to share, that's also fine. So is there anything that you want to kind of bring into the bigger group from the conversations that you had?
Yeah, we were sharing that in Catalonia at least, what it really makes a difference is one of the things we were saying about values of inclusion. The third one you used, that everyone is ready and people doesn't need to pass a test to live their lives. So this is completely shocking for us. I mean, we are trying to act in this way, but maybe we should change it us, not them. I mean, we need to adapt ourselves. Stop planning so much, maybe stop doing so many structures, methodologies, and so on. And for once, just listen and to be attentive of the needs, of the wishes, of the non-verbal communication, and so on. And then it's up to us to connect all the possibilities, all the third parties, and make it possible. But we have like big range of participants for each one of our educators, so it's so difficult to ask them, to train them to say, okay, stop, forget about your training, forget about your test, forget about your fitting, whatever, and just try to listen. What did he say about needs and wishes? And maybe she was saying yes because she was feeling forced to say yes, but in a way he was saying no. What did you get from him? And we don't have this space
Brilliant.
for listening.
Yeah.
A little in the Middle Age, I think.
That's brilliant.
Because we're still fighting for the language we use when we talk about people with disabilities. Because I still listen, this boy and this girl, and she's 65. No, all the professionals, they are not social workers. They are monitors, like kids things.
Yeah.
You know, and this is not just words, it means the whole
Yeah.
thing.
It goes down to the values. Yeah.
It's meaningful.
Yeah.
The paternalism, you know, the very old Christian helping. No, come on, we're in the 2025.
Yeah, get with it.
And we've been talking about this for 23 years.
Yeah.
Person-centered care for 20 years. And they still say, this new way of this is not new. People talk about it in the 80s. I mean,
God.
I had a big job in
Yeah. And it's that careful balance, isn't it, when you're working alongside people, that being person-centered and creating the culture of being able to really get into the space to have a conversation to unpack that. So you hear it and not letting it go past, but then how do you have a conversation in such a way that is challenging but respectful? Because you want the relationships with the team and the people around you to be really positive and strong, because ultimately it's the relationships that you have there that influence then the experience of the people that you support. You know, so it's how to get that piece right.
Something that I want to point is the importance of the skillness of the professionals. I've been training a lot about non-verbal communication, because I'm working with people with very advanced dementia, so they cannot talk, they and it helps a lot. So keep trying, keep training, keep learning, keep improving our work.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That's
There's a
sign for me
it's
massively.
fascinating. I just think there's that whole. I can't remember what the book was called, but a writer called Peter Block, and a really simple quote was, "If you want to change the culture, change the conversation."
Yeah.
So you don't need a big strategy. You just need to. It's that interactions, isn't it? That stuff around. Sometimes that's really easy to let go because it's a long battle, isn't it? But.
And it's about how we
really
touch
important, isn't it?
people, and because sometimes we are very like, like this.
Yeah.
The people, I need movement, no? And sometimes they say how you sit in front of somebody when you work, and when people is in the wheelchair.
Yeah. Yes.
We usually
like that power, the power of.
We usually do like this.
You collapse.
Are you comfortable?
In the words of Jeffrey, go away.
Sometimes they do this. Sometimes they do this.
Yeah.
No, if they do this, it's because they want to.
Yeah, exactly. But it's that dynamic, isn't it? And then it's understanding the power dynamic that we have
let
with
the
people.
other go, if you want.
Yeah.
Leave the space.
Yeah.
And this is little things.
Very subtle, but it makes a big difference.
How you move, how you see, how you watch.
Yeah.
The shocking thing is you don't do that with none.
I know. No, you. Ha. Yeah.
Sit in front of her and say, "Hi, Lumila, do you feel comfortable talking like this?"
Sometimes you want to be nice, but you do this and you do this and then you do this, and then this person is
controlled.
Loud.
Yeah.
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 I am the power. I am
I'm the expert.
Or touching the hair, touching.
Yeah. Is there anything that other groups want to share as well from?
I was reminded by a quote from Shaker Khan, my sort of guru friend, who used to say, if you want transformation change, you have to set in motion things you can't control. And that to me is the essence of this, of what I came late, or what you're saying. You're trying to control things, you're not going to get any change.
Yeah.
It's going to carry on. Paternalism, control.
Yeah.
I think it's a very useful thing to get, and to be upfront with it. If you want us to come in and help us in real change, we're going to have set emotions things we can't control.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt.
Very true.
Anything from yourselves that you want to share back?
Yeah, we were great.
We've got it all sussed. We've got it all.
I was actually saying, we just talk about people and supporting people, and then we have the systems and fitting the systems. And I am someone who, I do like the paperwork. I like understanding the paperwork. I like actually understanding that particular piece. And I don't want to say it so I can just go, I can understand it. Right. Get it out of the way. But there is a bit of that because we put people through systems, as in staff. We put these filters in their eyes about how they talk to people and ticking off checklists, and then we're surprised then that the staff teams that we're working with are actually afraid to do anything. So it's like, actually, that's great that we all understand people. Now can we actually get rid of that and get on with the work, please? And then just going out and just being cheeky or naughty or bold, or what was the expression that you used? What was that expression saying? Just
Yeah.
But that's it. It's just okay. Now we've done all that.
Yeah. We've scared you for 2 weeks on induction. Forget all that stuff now, because that's out the way, definitely.
It is, It's just that fear, that you see in people. And I'm talking about staff, never mind the people who support it. And then actually just empowering them, empowering people, and just like, get out there.
I think that staff thing, we just talked about staff, and it's that culture conversation things. Change the conversation, and I love what Martin said about, let things happen and lose control. I think that's really good.